Well, hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in for our lecture tonight, Why Core Emotions Matter. Tonight we have a very special guest for us all. Dr. Nan Wise is a neuroscientist, a certified sex therapist, board-certified clinical hypnotherapist, certified relationship specialist, and academic researcher with 3 decades of experience. Driven by an intense desire to understand how the brain operates to create moods and behaviors, Dr. Nan returned to academia in 2009 to pursue a PhD in cognitive neuroscience at Rutgers, Newark. Her research attempts to address gaps in the scientific literature regarding the neural basis of human sexuality and continues to garner international attention. She has been featured on the Discovery Channel, ABC's Dateline, CBS's The Doctors, NBC's Today Show, as well as Glamour Magazine and Psychology Today. Her new book, titled Why Good Sex Matters, Understanding the Neuroscience of Pleasure for a Smarter, Happier, and More Purpose-Filled Life, was released back in January, which explores and describes the deficiencies associated with anhedonia, the inability to feel a satisfactory amount of pleasure, and provides the pathway back to a fully enjoying sex, food, time with family and friends, and other pastimes, while also staving off depression, anxiety, and addiction. The book is in our library collection and will be available once the library opens, which is hopefully in the near future. So let's all
thank you, Brian.
And for coming to us and giving us this fantastic lecture.
Thank you so much. So, well, since it's a small group, I'm going to welcome you guys to ask any questions or interrupt me at any time. If you notice background noise, if you want, you can mute yourself until you want to talk. But anyway, so this is what we're going to cover tonight. What I'm going to talk about is, even before we were locked down with the coronavirus, we were having basically a pleasure crisis. We had increases in people having anxiety, depression, stress-related disorders, and it's not getting better, nor is it going to get better. We anticipate some very big mental health challenges that are already happening. So the pleasure crisis before plus the pandemic equals ouch. But the good news here is that crisis contains the opportunity for growth and learning. So what we're going to do today is we're going to adapt the ideas that I have put in my book that are very, very relevant to how we can regulate those wired in core emotional systems that psychology ignores because we share them with animals. In psychology and medicine, we like to think of human beings as being a separate, sort of above everybody else and everything else, and animals off to the side. But the truth is that we share with other animals, certainly mammals and most vertebrates, very similar wired in emotional instincts that help us protect ourselves, meet our needs, and also to interact and be social with other people in our case. So when these core systems are in balance, people cannot relax and they don't function well. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is those core systems, how they're embodied emotions, how we can recognize them, how we can work with them, so that not only can we regulate ourselves better, but we can turn our distress into adaptive coping and actually thriving. So to be able to really understand how these core systems work, we need to understand a little bit more about how the brain-mind works. And actually, my book, Why Good Sex Matters, sounds like a book about sex, but it's actually more a book about these emotional systems. When sex is not working, or when we're having issues about sexuality, usually it reflects some kind of distress. Either people are anxious, depressed, stressed out, or having a rough time. So the relationship with sexuality is just a window in to how well those emotional systems are working.
You see, I have microphone on, I think, here.
Yeah, I think if you just mute it, if you mute the microphone, then we won't hear you until you want us to hear you. So finally, we're going to talk about tools. And this is going to be really important. I've been writing a lot and sharing with people how we can basically have a toolbox that we can use to cope with the stress of the coronavirus challenge and begin to set up some very healthy habits that can leave us feeling better than we felt before. So next, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the defensive systems. So all animals, all the way back to even invertebrates, have these defensive systems. They get afraid, they get enraged, and they also have what's called panic grief reactions. And that's actually more true of the more developed animals. So fear makes sense. We know what fear is. Fear is when something is dangerous, we want to either freeze or get out of dodge. And that's a wired-in instinct into our body. In fact, fear will get us moving away from danger before the smarter part, the higher parts of our mind even know what's going on. Likewise, rage is something that animals and people feel when we feel threatened, our resources are threatened, when we feel blocked, when we feel held back. And that also is an embodied thing. In fact, people can end up having what we can call a emotional hijacking when they get either mad enough or scared enough that they do things that aren't so good for us and not so smart. The panic grief system is a very interesting system that wires us to stay close to our resources. So if we take a little baby animal away from its mother, what does it do? It gets very upset. It will just have distress cries. Human beings feel a lot of pain when we're cut off from our significant others, our resources, and all of that. And actually, the panic grief system is the source of our emotional pain, our heartbreak. And when that system isn't functioning so well, we can end up with depression. So moving on, now we're going to talk about the affiliative systems. Now, those are the systems that get us to connect. The one that's very visceral, they're all actually visceral, but the care system. And the care system is wired by opiates. Our connections with our loved ones and our feelings about the people close to us release our body's own opioids that make us feel relaxed and comfortable, okay? So that is really nature's antidepressant. We feel soothed, we feel comfortable, we feel good in our bodies when we feel the care system elicited. A system that also is very important in affiliating is the play system. Now, you see that with children and you see that with baby animals. They play. That's how they learn about the world, is they play. My own grandchildren, I just FaceTimed with them. I have one that's 1 year old and one that's 2.5. They play all day long, and that's how they learn. With us adults, the play system tends to get flat, and we feel a kind of flatness, a kind of sort of lack of exuberance or enthusiasm. And I'm going to talk in a minute about a system that works with all of these systems called the seeking system. But the last one I just want to note is the lust system. Nature wired us with these systems that turn on when animals are looking for mates. So we're wired, in a sense, to find mates and to have sex and to reproduce. So these circuits, all of these emotional circuits are not hypothetical things. They are wired into these older parts of our brains. And if you stimulate them electrically, or chemically, you get those behaviors. So these are actual systems that are in the oldest parts of our brain. Now, the system that I want to talk about, which is a really important system that works with both the instinctive defensive systems and also these connection affiliative systems, is the seeking system. When we talk about seeking system, we're talking about when people feel mobilized and motivated to get their needs met. And that, in fact, is powered by the neurotransmitter called dopamine. Have you guys ever heard of dopamine? Right? Well, what's going wrong with a lot of our emotional systems is the dopamine system is being hijacked because our attention is so divided. When people are sitting there and they're on their phone and they're on their computer and they're watching TV and the notifications are going off all over the place, that artificially harnesses this dopamine seeking system. And then what happens is it gets really flat and we're not paying attention to each other. We're not enjoying each other. We're not enjoying our relationships. And I see this with a lot of my college students. They have big issues just paying attention. It's really hard for them to focus in on something enough to be able to have critical thinking, to be able to reason through things. It's like their attention's all over the place. So before we go on, I want to mention something I'm noticing, and I bet you guys are too. Are you noticing that a lot of people are triggered? If you watch the news, people are angry and people are fighting the Democrats and the Republicans and fake news and this and that. There's a lot of triggered emotions now. And not only is that not good for us, it actually increases the stress hormones that can be very, very bad, not only for our physical well-being, but our mental health well-being. May happens to be mental health awareness. And one of the reasons why I actually wrote this book was to help people understand that the ability to feel pleasure, and it doesn't have to be sexual pleasure, it's pleasure through connection with other people, is key to physical and emotional wellness and health. So moving on now, I'm going to talk about the 3 levels of mind. So we as human beings, we have this really amazing thing that Jilly doesn't have. Jilly doesn't go, oh, mommy left me. She left me yesterday too. How dare she do that? She doesn't reflect on her emotions. Although at the very base of the brain, these older systems, she has them. Animals have at the core the same kind of basic emotions. They feel fear, they feel rage, they feel care, they feel panic when they're separated from their significant, members of their family or their owners. And they also have obviously the sex system, the lust system, the seeking system. So at the bottom of the brain, all of these chemicals and all of these circuits are very, very similar. But at the top of the brain, we reflect. We think about how we feel. So if you think about emotions are these wired in things, and feelings more like reflecting on our emotions. We are similar in some ways to, let's say, for example, our closest relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, and all of those. But there's something about us where we have the capacity in a way to reflect even more on these emotions than our 4-legged friends, for sure. Now, this part of the brain, the middle part of the brain, is really what we call the automatic learning brain. So have you guys ever had a really bad experience someplace and you walk into that place again and you just feel lousy? That kind of conditioning. It's that learning that happens because things are either very good, like if something is very good, we should remember that, right? Because it's important, like a good source of food or connection. Or if something is very bad, we remember it too. And that's where the fear learning shows up, where people get, for example, like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's because that mid-level learning brain activates all of these emotions. And, come on, at the end of the day, we all know what we should do, right? We know we should eat better, we should exercise more, we shouldn't get so angry. But at the top of the mind, even though we know we should do these things, we can't necessarily enact the things that we know would be good for us, because these old learnings and old emotions flare up, and they basically derail us from being able to stay centered, stay focused, stay on track. So that's why I, as a therapist, really, really try as much as I can to help people recognize the embodied manifestations of emotions, so that when we listen into the body and we work with our bodies, we can be more intelligent with what we do. So now, should we talk about the tools? Yes. 2 very important basic tools that I work with clients about. So let's say you're an anxious person. Nature has wired my family that 20% of people have like an anxiety disorder. My family all tend towards anxiety. That comes along with our genes. Some families are wired for depression. Some families and people are wired to be a little bit, let's say, hot-headed. That's the genes that we're born with. Then we have experiences that can make those tendencies worse or better. What we all have to start with, no matter where we are, is a radical acceptance. We need to accept, okay, so I have anxiety. Or let's say we're in the middle of this pandemic. We can't do what we want to do. We're living with uncertainty every single day. The 2 most uncomfortable things for human beings are tolerating uncertainty and being patient. So we are really, really challenged. So the first thing I help people do is practice radical acceptance. What does that mean? Well, it's letting yourself be where you are. It's the acceptance of being at this point in time, however we are, with whatever's on our minds, whatever's happening in our bodies, whatever's going on in our world. We need to relax around our resistance and be able to put our feet on the ground of now. So that's a very important, giving ourselves permission. The second thing I'm going to talk about here is one of the most simple and powerful things that you can do for your nervous system. So you guys probably remember that the nervous system has roughly 2 components. The kind that, runs our bodies, like moving our bodies and all of that. And then the kind that the nervous system that runs all of our body systems. So running our respiration, our breathing, well, breathing is respiration, blood pressure, all of our functions are run by the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is the source of the fight or fight reaction. When you get really scared or really angry, your heart starts to pound, right? Your body goes into that automatic fight or fight reaction. We live in that fight or flight reaction a lot. That's why so many people have high blood pressure, why we're stressed out so much, because nature did not intend for us to have that constant fight or flight reaction. it was meant as a reaction to an immediate threat, like a saber-toothed tiger coming at us or something dangerous. So this autonomic nervous system has a quieting function. Each one of our organs is wired with both the stimulating part of the nervous system and then the restorative part, which is called the parasympathetic. So things like digestion, things like restoring all of our body's function and getting relaxed and feeling calm is the work of the parasympathetic system. Now, that was a long story. Here's the short story. There's a very easy way for us to balance the nervous system by simply taking a long, smooth inhale in and then making the exhalation longer than the inhale. So that's called, I call that breath boot camp. But it actually stimulates something called the vagal brake. It will slow your heart down, and it also enhances your cardiac functioning. And it's really very simple. So all you need to remember is that you've got a body. That sometimes is hard for people to remember. And that your body is breathing. And then what you can do to balance your nervous system, like build the strength of the calming component, is by taking a long, smooth inhale and a longer, smooth exhalation. So if you're inhaling for the count of, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you can exhale for the count of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's simple and it's powerful. And if I had equipment that I could hook you up to look at your cardiac functioning and your heart rate, you would see that as you did that breath, your pulse would lower a bit, your blood pressure would lower a bit, and your cardiac variability, which is a good thing, would improve. So now we're going to pull out the toolbox if you're ready. So I call this my coronavirus emergency toolkit. So I have been telling people that what you need to do is interrupt habits from the moment you wake up. What do most people do when they wake up in the morning? They usually start looking at their phone, or they turn on the news, so immediately plugging into our devices. All right, well, the good news is those devices will be there if you don't tune into them right away. And if you interrupt the habit of just waking up and sticking your face in your device or turning on, God forbid, the news, I'm rolling my eyes here. And what you do is you have a cup of coffee and you talk to another human being. Now, if you're living alone, you might have to get on your computer or your phone and you talk to somebody and you say, hey, how are you? What's on your mind? What's on your body? How's your emotional weather? By doing that, creating a new healthy habit of giving yourself some time to experience how you're feeling and connecting with another human being, you're going to set yourself up to be able to know what's on your mind, what's in your body, what your emotional weather is before you get all hijacked. Remember I talked about the dopamine system? When that dopamine system gets hijacked by our devices, it's no longer available to be able to fund our emotional well-being. Dopamine's an important neurotransmitter for mood regulation, as is serotonin. When you take and you let that dopamine get hijacked, what you're doing is you're interfering with your brain's functioning, proper functioning. Now, I talked about the seeking system, which is the system that gets us enthusiastic, that gets us curious, that gets us mobilized. What I've been telling people is the first thing after you wake up in the morning, you want to seek sunlight, Well, why? Why would we want to seek sunlight? Did you know that sunlight goes directly from the back of your eye to your retina, all the way to your hypothalamus? Your hypothalamus is the master of every function in your body. Is it any wonder that we're overweight? We can't sleep properly because the hypothalamus is controlling eating, sleeping. It's controlling metabolism. It's controlling mood. It's controlling our emotions. It's controlling our sexual behavior. It's the master of the autonomic nervous system. And most of us spend about 90% of our time indoors, which is probably why most of us are depressed, anxious. Many of us are overweight. We're not getting enough sunlight and we're not getting enough movement. So if you take yourself outside twice a day and move in the sunlight for at least maybe 10, 15 minutes, I guarantee you, though, in the course of a week, your mood will get better, your sleeping will get better, your eating will balance out. All of what we do that are our bad habits, like eating too much, drinking, are really ways of us trying to balance our emotional systems that are out of balance. So by getting enough sunlight, we start to reset all of that, all of those systems in a way that's really, really important. So the next thing I talk about is seek structure and organize your day. I'm an anxious person. I've always been an anxious person, but I will tell you, here's my credibility story. I used to get so much anxiety just thinking about public speaking. I had a terrible anxiety attack as a young adult. So I've always been a little wary of my own nervous system. From doing all this breathing and all of these tools that I've learned, I've been able to quiet my panic reactions enough that when I went right before the coronavirus hit the fan, I was on the Today Show interviewed by Maria Shriver, and I wasn't even nervous. If I can do that, if I can work with my own nervous system and calm it, I was having the best time. Kevin Bacon was backstage. I'm like looking around going, this is so much fun. So now when I talk about seeking structure and organizing the day, I'll get back to my anxiety. One of the things, now I've done a lot, I've been around a long time and I've done a lot of things and my mind is very, very busy. The way that I handle my anxiety is first thing in the morning, I structure and organize my day. So what I do after I get my cup of coffee and talk to my husband, get a little sun, we like to go walking in the morning before we turn on the TV. I sit down and I do what I call my executive decision time. And I learned this tool from, do any of you remember Stephen Covey? He was the Effective Habits, the 7 Habits of Effective People. Remember that book? He talks about organizing yourself. And you go, basically, I just take one piece of paper and I put it into 4 sections, urgent and important. I write what I think is urgent and important down. Then what's just urgent. So like urgent was like one of my students needed me to fill out a change of grade thing and it had to be in today. Now, is it important? Maybe to her, and I'd like to do a good job, but it's not in that sort of important thing that's going to change my life. So we also have another category called important. Important but not urgent is the stuff that's going to change our lives. Those are the things over the long term that if we keep moving ourselves forward to, it's going to make a big difference in our lives. And then there's another category called neither urgent nor important. In that category, it might be things you just want to do. Not urgent or not important, but you just want to get them done. Or maybe, you know, it's like, I have this thing where I like to organize my files once a year. That's in that neither urgent nor important category. It doesn't really matter, but it'll be nice to get it done. So seeking the structure and organizing your day lets you take what's at the top of the mind and put it out of your mind and onto the paper. Before you get pulled into your email, before you get pulled into your devices, before you get pulled into the news, you take some time to really think through how you can organize your day, and you get extra points if you put on your list something that's pleasurable and what I call healthy hedonism. What's healthy hedonism? Not eating 2 bags of nachos. That's not healthy hedonism. That feels good, but is it good for you? Not so good, right? And the next day your stomach might be upset later. What we want to do is create healthy hedonism practices, things that feel good and are good for you. So this is where feeding ourselves more intentionally. Think about the foods that nature created, not created in the labs, and certainly not manufactured foods. So foods that taste good and are good for you, if you eat them intentionally, you're probably going to feel better and more nourished than if you eat unintentionally and just randomly. I am really bad at eating fast. I'm a fast eater because I'm always in a rush. Not a good practice. So if you sit down, make sure you eat with other people. Americans are the worst. No other country have people sit at their desk shoving food in their mouth. And if you don't have someone there with you, make a date, make a lunch date with somebody on Zoom or on your phone and go, what time are you eating lunch? Let's sit down and do it together. So feed yourself foods that taste good and are good for you. And guess what? You can have delicious things. You can have dessert. You can eat healthy and eat delicious things. You just need to be a little mindful about what you're eating and how you're eating. You don't have to do without delicious stuff. I had gained a bunch of weight when I did my dissertation. That's a whole other story. You know, when you sit and sit and sit. And I decided at a certain point that I wanted to just kind of get back into healthy eating. And I was eating like delicious things, but I was just paying attention to what I ate. And the weight came off because you just eat like you want to feed yourself healthy, as opposed to, I can't tell you how many of my clients can't love themselves because they're too fat. I can't like my body, it's too fat. Excuse me? How about loving your body and treating it good right now? Take your beautiful body out and walk it and play, enjoy your body now. Be in your body, listen to your body. So this goes into learning self-attunement. And remember we talked about the care system powered by opiates? We need to learn how to attune to ourselves. And what does that mean? Well, what's on your mind? What's on my mind? What's in my body? What's my emotional weather? When I work with clients, a lot of times I find that they're so in their heads, often with like negative self-talk and thinking about the bad things and things that happen to them, that they're not really paying attention to their bodies. They're not noticing that they have a body, and they're not allowing themselves to listen into what does your body need? Does your body need, bodies don't need to sit for 24 hours a day. They need to move. They need to stretch. They need to dance. They give us a lot of information. That's why we talk about gut feelings. There's as many neurotransmitters in your gut. It's the same tissue that develops into your brain. We need to listen to that. So there's lots of people who are good at taking care of others, but not so good at taking care of themselves. So that's a very important thing to learn, how to be attuned to yourself. What do you need? What do you need? What do you want? And then we need to create a new normal every day. We don't know when we're going to open up. We don't know what's happening about this, that, or the other thing. We're living in a very chaotic time right now. Even the news is chaotic. What is the news? Is that real news, fake news, whatever? So every single day we need to be in a conversation with ourselves. What do I need today to be okay? What do I need to do for me today? How do I prioritize my own well-being and take care of myself and also connect with others. Because even when we were not on lockdown, if you went out in public, did you see people sitting there like this? Right? People didn't talk to each other at the gym anymore. Everybody's plugged in. People didn't connect anymore. We need to do this. The main issue, I think, driving so much of the anxiety and depression prior to the coronavirus is the epidemic of loneliness and disconnection. Even people living with people are so plugged in. You know, you see them sitting and you know, how many times have I gone out to dinner and there are 4 people in a family, 2 adults and 2 kids, and everybody's on a device? We need to do away with that. Devices are great, but they don't serve us if we're getting hijacked constantly by that. So creating the new normal is a dynamic that we can do every day. So what I'd like to do now, and I realize that, you know, I've been talking a lot, but I want to open it up to questions and comments from you guys. If there's other stuff you want to, I touch very briefly about the systems and whatever in the brain and the mind, but I'm happy to hear any of your questions or your comments or concerns. Yes.
Well, it makes perfect sense what you say. I think so much of it is common sense, but living the lives that we do, I think we tend to ignore a lot of things that are truly common sense. The breathing, I never even thought about exhaling longer than I inhale. I just kind of take it all for granted. But you know, if that's going to help, or if it's going to help the seniors, I certainly want to suggest that to them. But also paying attention to yourself, and because we tend to, I think as women, pay more attention and try to be of aid to others or to help others, and kind of put ourselves on the back burner. So I appreciate the points that you shared. I really like them, and I'm going to try to take a lot of them to heart. I like the idea of structuring and organizing your day, because mine just I just try to deal with things as they come, but it makes a lot of sense to try to organize and structure it.
And you know what's nice about that too, Val, is you can look at that list the next day and cross off and migrate things. Like yesterday, what was important wasn't urgent, but now today it might be important and urgent. So it keeps us from having to hold it all up here and get distracted by, you know, like things coming at us, which is urgent but not necessarily important. You know, and back to this thing about self-care, you know, here's a fun fact to know and to tell, is women's brains in general differ from male brains. And this happens in utero. There is 2 separate stages in development. One stage changes the body into a male versus female body, and another stage run by a different hormone masculinizes or feminizes the brain. Now, what does that mean? The masculine brain has a lot more places for certain kinds of hormones like vasopressin and testosterone to dock, which certainly makes a lot of sense when you think about men across all cultures. Think more about sex than women. It's not a cultural thing. If you ask men in every single culture and how many times a day they think about sex, it's going to be way more than women. Women, on the other hand, we have a lot of circuits in the brain that are sensitive to oxytocin, which is a different kind of hormone. And that hormone is the hormone of motherhood and of connection and tend and befriend. So women's brains are kind of circuited to be more focused on that kind of relational stuff. And then we get certainly culture telling us stuff about how we're supposed to be. So what's really important to know is that everything about us has roots in biology, has roots in our learning and has roots in our culture. So everything is biopsychosocial. So we as women are wired basically in the brain to pay more attention to relationships, but we also socialize not to value ourselves as much. And if you don't think we're living in a racist and a sexist country, wowza, it's really gotten, what used to be implicit has gone explicit. So we're back on the table where we're not valuing Black lives, we're not valuing women. You know what? If women were valued, nobody would be legislating what they can do with their bodies other than them. So we need to look at how we are both wired biologically and then affected by culture. So the coming back to really taking good care of ourselves, it's like the oxygen mask on us first before we help anybody else. And there are men who are likewise very relational. Now, when I talk about the average brain, there are differences between the average male brain and the female brain. But people have different temperaments. And you'll find men that are very nurturing and very sensitive, and you'll find women that are aggressive. But as a rule, men tend to have more aggressive and sexual kinds of stuff going on, and women tend to be more relational. They get aggressive, but in different ways. So there are sex differences, and there are cultural things that affect us in the sense that can actually make it harder for women to feel entitled to our own self-care. Deep inhale, longer, smooth exhalation. We need to practice radical acceptance of what is, and then we're going to get out and vote. And we're going to take care of each other. We're going to do good things because most people are really great. Other questions or comments?
I just have a quick one. When you were talking about going out to get sunlight, you gave an average of how long you should be in the sun each time out of those two. What was that number?
I said about 15 minutes at a time.
At both, so
yeah. So you want to get, like, if you think about, we spend 90% of our time indoors, and so we're not getting proper activation of the hypothalamus, which talks to the pineal gland that sets our day, our basically hormone cycles, sleep waking cycles. So the reason why I picked 15 minutes is I think if we shoot for 15 minutes, we'll get out there. If I say you got to go out for a half an hour, I don't know people going to do that. You know what I mean? So if we get outside and we start walking and we're out, like this morning, John, my husband and I, we took a walk around. We went to Marshall School and back. It's about 3 miles. And that was perfect. But it doesn't even have to be that long. And then I try once in the afternoon to walk outside just so that I'm moving, I'm breathing, and I'm getting the sunlight. And if we do that, we're gonna be in better shape than we were before the coronavirus. Any other questions? Hello?
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can.
Okay. Do you have so you were saying you have techniques you use before you're going on stage or managing kind of public speaking? Are there things you could share besides like deep breaths?
Yeah, actually, it's so funny because what we know about public speaking is people are more afraid of public speaking than dying. It's one of the big things. So on my website, if you go to AskDrNan.com and doctor spelled out, I have a series of videos that I put out there, to help people with the coronavirus. And one of the next set of breath tools, which actually I learned when I did a lot of yoga, is working with what they call the energy locks, which is like these, and I explain it in my book, and I do a video on it. By working with those energy locks, one is the floor of the pelvis, the other is the belly button back to spine, and then chin down to chest. I was really able to tone, I think, my nervous system so that I didn't get quite so triggered even at the thought. And I mean, if I tell you, when I went back to graduate school, I was 50 years old. And I remember having to wait to give my year-end talk. So here I am, the oldest living graduate student. I already had my license as a psychotherapist, but I was going back to study cognitive neuroscience. I had to sit through a 2.5-hour meeting to get to do my 8-minute talk to justify what I did for research. The 2.5 hours I sat there, I was tortured. I was like, you know, like I kept feeling like I was going to have a panic attack. And it was really, I think, the dedicated practice of, first of all, using the breath tools a lot. And secondly, just doing it, getting up and talking and getting up and talking. Like the combination of the two of them ended up, and then when you realize a lot of fear, if you put more breath into your body, turns into excitement. So those racy feelings, some people I know use Inderol, propranolol, which is a beta blocker that helps their heart not speed up then. I haven't tried that. I've heard it works well, but I do it non-pharmacologically by practicing the breath and giving myself permission to get up there and to like basically feel my feelings, get as anxious as I can, and then get over it. I also found in the beginning, if I wrote down every word that I was going to say, and I used the PowerPoint tools where you can actually have your notes, that helped me a lot, because then I wouldn't feel so panicky. It would give me like the jump start so I could read. Now, of course, it's better when people can actually talk to you rather than reading. But if you need to read and to get you started, or you practice, like I practiced a lot of the talks so that I really was clear on, because I wanted, you know, when you're doing like a 8-minute talk to justify your whole year of research, you better get it down right. Now, most public speaking is not like that. It's a lot more, you know, open. But so it's the combination of the breath tools, the practice, and the giving yourself permission to be panicky. Oh, so what's the worst thing that'll happen? I'll faint. I'll still get up and, you know, I'll be all right. I'll live. Very common fear, by the way. Very common. Anything else? Questions? So if anybody has any questions, you can always drop me a line at my website. I also, if you want to share it with anybody, there's a lot of things that I've written. I read a lot. I have a column for Glamour, which is kind of interesting, but I do a lot of different, I write for Shondaland. I've written for Psychology Today. I write for, my blog has some pretty interesting things. You can find out, you can take anxiety quizzes. You can find out what your lover type is. I try and keep it entertaining on there, informative, lots of videos too. And you can shoot me questions. You can book, if anybody needs to talk to me, you can book a free 15-minute consult there. I've been actually doing a lot of public stuff, like on web, you know, podcasts and radio and stuff. And it's amazing how, like, somebody just called me the other day from, what is that country? I can't even think of it. It's not Beirut. I have a client from Beirut, but people hear you all over the world and they ask questions and they contact you. So it was really a pleasure to spend time with you guys tonight. Thank you for showing up, and good luck with everything that you're doing, and keep in touch. And I hope to see you all at the library.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
This was great.
Have a nice evening, everyone.
And I need to thank everybody for tuning into this. I'm glad we were all able to learn something new. And I know I had a good time, and I hope everyone else did as well.
Well, keep in touch, everybody, you know, and remember, pleasure's not a luxury. It's a necessity. So let's go have some good, healthy hedonism, everybody. Woo! Talk to you soon, guys. Be well.
Have a good night.
Bye. Bye.